All right, well, let's get started. Good evening and welcome to Thursday Night Live from Studio 3C or whatever it is here in good old New Hampshire. My name is Brendan Barnard. I'm the Director of College Counseling at the Derryfield School and the College Admission Program Advisor at the Making Caring Common Project at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. And we have an amazing group of panelists from all over the country tonight, and I will introduce them in a second. First, I want to just say that just kind of a few housekeeping things. We are recording this, and we will share it out afterwards. Everybody that's registered will get an email as a follow-up, and feel free to share it with your networks and your communities. We will be using the chat function to ask questions, and this really, the success of these evenings really depends on participants' questions and what you want to hear. We're going to start with a few questions, and then we'll just open it up. And questions just about anything, about it. Well, hopefully about college admission, but who knows? Maybe they'll field questions on other things too. It doesn't have to be necessarily related to our current experience of dealing with the virus, but just kind of admission in general from some varying perspectives. So having said that, and this is co-sponsored by the Derryfield School and by the Character Collaborative. So thanks to both of those organizations. So I'm going to read these introductions as always because they're very full, and I've actually cut them down a little so we have time for questions tonight. But I will start with Jim Rawlins. Jim is the Director of Admissions and an Assistant Vice President at the University of Oregon. He has been in the admission profession since 1993, working at the University of Washington, Colorado State University, and Western Washington University. In addition to University of Oregon, where he is now. He is an active member in the admissions community, and Jim has served in various capacities at the regional and national level, including as the president of NACAC, the National Association of College Admission Counselors. Jim's personal background includes a secret past as a professional orchestra musician, which I had no idea. What instrument, Jim? Oh.
Mainly the kettle drums, so the percussion section.
Oh, nice. All right. Well, maybe we can, maybe Jim can be part of our band in the future, our Thursday Night Live band. Next, we have Jeff Schiffman. Jeff is the Director of Admission at Tulane University. He's been in the Office of Admissions since the month after he graduated from Tulane back in 2005 and worked his way up to Director of Admission 3 years ago. He is currently the chair of the Young Admissions Directors Special Interest Group with NACAC, where he enjoys sharing the trials and tribulations of being a millennial and a leader in the admission profession. In his free time, he enjoys anything related to health and fitness, and he teaches spinning classes at a studio not far from campus. And Jeff says, if you're ever a student and in the New Orleans area, your first class is free. Your tuition to Tulane is not, but your first class is free.
Not free.
And Jeff, I'll let you weigh in. Jeff is in transit. He is moving across the Southeast, and so that's why he's joined us on video today. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you so much for having me.
And finally, we have Peaches Valdez, who is the Dean of Admission at Hamilton College. She has been in the admissions and enrollment management field for 20 years. And prior to joining the Hamilton community, Peaches was the Dean of Undergraduate Admission and former Director of Undergraduate and Graduate Admission at Bryn Mawr College. In addition to her work in admissions, Peaches has also been a social worker and ombudsperson, faculty member and for pre-orientation social justice programs, and a college equal opportunity officer and Title IX officer. So with all that, thank you all for joining us. Really appreciate you taking some time tonight. I know your lives are busy as we are here as you try to land your incoming classes. And I'm going to start with the question that we started with for every one of these webinars. And maybe Peaches, maybe I'll start with you and we'll work to Jim and then Jeff. What is one truth about college admission? There's a lot of myths and a lot of hype and kind of misunderstood things about college admission, but what do you see as one truth? Peaches, you're muted, sorry. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. So what is the one truth about college admissions and this college process? I think it would probably say that it's a human process. I think that regardless of the efforts of technology and modernization, I think it's still a one-to-one. It's an individual process that on both sides. So whether it's the student applying or the those of us who are fortunate to be able to read their application. So there is a personal and component to this whole thing. So
that's great. That's great. Thank you. Jim, what do you think? One truth about college admission.
I think a big, long-standing truth about college admissions is that there's a whole lot more yes than no. And for all the things that are stressing everybody watching us now about, oh my gosh, what will I do to get in? It is one of the most empowering and important things you'll do, and especially, I'm going to say, in the coming year, to remember that whatever is involved with you trying to do your best to get selected by colleges, this process starts and ends with you selecting who you'll even look at, and ultimately who you will select to enroll with at the end. And never lose sight of that. It has everything to do with this process.
It's a great point. That idea of student agency and choice, that they're driving the process, right? So thank you. Jeff, what do you think?
So I think one truth that I would say is that you will more than likely land where you are supposed to land. And I can use myself as an example. You know, when I was a high school senior, I had my sights set on one university and one university only, and it was my top choice, and I applied early decision. And back in the day, when you didn't get admitted, you used to get the small envelope in the mail, and I got that small envelope in the mail from my top choice school. And so I guess my point with that is that, you know, even directors of admission get rejected. So I got denied admission, and I ended up landing at Tulane, which was probably not even in my top couple of choices at the time. And, you know, here I am as the director of admission at a school that I love very, very deeply. So if it doesn't work out at the very beginning, one piece of advice I always say is that, you know, everything will be all right in the end. If it's not all right, it's not the end. So you'll land exactly where you're supposed to.
That's a great point. I had a similar search. When I started out my college search, I said I grew up in Pennsylvania outside Philadelphia, and I said I wasn't going to go to a school in Pennsylvania or a state that touched Pennsylvania. And my mother convinced me to go look at a school an hour down the road just to have a kind of a practice interview, and went there and fell in love with it and applied and ended up going to a school in Pennsylvania an hour from home. So stay open. That's another truth, I guess. And Jim, maybe we'll start with you on this next question. We talk a lot about kind of what factors into admissions decisions, but also what students bring to campuses. And one of the things that is talked about more and more is kind of the non-cognitive piece and character. And so would love to hear from each of you kind of what you see as the role of character in college admission.
Sure, I'd be happy to give a first crack at that. Well, one of the things that you're all seeing, of course, is that we represent different geographies and different kinds of schools. And I do want to first start by saying, not even just so much for the University of Oregon, but for, let's call them, larger public institutions around the country. There's a lot of times where students and family figure we won't look at these kinds of things at all. And while it's certainly true that a lot of things we do are governed by things our state requires us to do, I'll also say that all of us as members of this broader profession at institutions like the University of Oregon know that things like character, understanding what you bring to campus in a personal way, not just an academic way, plus understanding the context of where you are to start with, really help us understand who's a good fit. And we do look for that. Don't ever think that we don't. And then also consider that as we talk about a variety of things related to this tonight, that it's not just about getting into the institution, it's about things like our scholarship opportunities, or on my campus, as an example, we have a wildly popular honors college for which admissions is very selective. And we do get more and more into understanding, not just is this a good student, but how are they going to be as a roommate, a classmate? What have they been doing to develop themselves in a way that's going to make them a plus to the people around them? And character and personal attributes are a big part of how we see making that fit work just right.
That's great, thanks. And maybe later we'll come back to the honors college question, because I think a lot of parents and students in the past have had some questions about how the process is different potentially for some honors colleges as opposed to the school as a whole. So maybe we'll come back to you. But Jeff, do you want to touch on this issue of character?
Yeah, I'd love to. One of my favorite articles ever about the world of college admission came out a couple years ago in the New York Times. And if you haven't read it, it was called "Check This Box If You're a Good Person." And I think it should be mandatory reading. It was by an admission rep at Dartmouth. That essentially says, we don't know, all we get is kind of these well-packaged applications. And what colleges are sometimes looking for is these little clues in your application that tell us what type of person you are, and particularly tell us what type of person you are when you think no one is watching, and in particular when you think college admission officers aren't watching. And so the article goes on to talk about a student who very kindly returned something to the admission rep and then just disappeared off into the crowd after she'd left. And so essentially, we look for clues. Your teachers might mention how you treat the custodial staff in your dining hall, or how you interact with folks from social circles different from your own. And those clues really lead us to believe the things that Jim was talking about, your character, how you'll be as a human being. I will say one final thing, just be cautious, Instagram, and that's totally to be understood, but, be kind, be compassionate, be appropriate in those worlds as well, because, sometimes you might do things that you think are appropriate at the time, but they might show a lapse in character. So just in this virtual world that we're living in, be cognizant of your character in those social media realms.
It's a great point. It's a great point. It gets dangerous online, especially. Peaches, what do you think?
So I think in regards to character, especially at a school like Hamilton, where it is 100% required residential, it's really important that we get a good sense of who that student is, not just what they've done and what they can bring to the community, but also how will they enrich the community when engaged with so many other people. I think all of our schools here, all of our institutions across the country are ones that want to be microcosms of the larger world, and therefore we want diversity, we want difference, we want to see how students are going to really engage with one another in an enriching and dynamic relationship, and how are they going to take that to the world outside of college and after the 4 years at the campus. But I think it's in regards to character, I think it is one where there's already an expectation of the students come with a certain level of values, and understanding that they're going to be challenged, they're going to be pushed in many ways to really challenge their own limits and perspectives on things. And so as long as they're open to that and being willing to be in that space where respectful dialogue is encouraged, I think, and knowing that they're in a place where they're going to be respected for what they bring to the table, I think is really important. And as Jeff was saying, and what Jim says, we look through that in the applications. It may not be, in many cases it'll be obvious, but when we're looking at applications, we're looking at all those various threads of the application to build this entire story of who the student is, not just as they are as a high school student, but what we can see is in the coming down the pipeline of who they will be once on our campuses.
That's great. Thank you. Great. So let's open it up to some of the questions here in the chat. I will just say that Jeff, we know Jeff is just his photo, and he is in the car on his way to get a little R&R.
Do you want me to explain my situation?
Yeah, why don't you?
So I am going to show my video, and I'm going to explain kind of what's going on right now. Okay, so I am currently a passenger in a car, and I will explain why. So I was supposed to get married the day after tomorrow, and unfortunately, as you probably can guess, my wedding was canceled. And then we found out yesterday that the second date that we had for our wedding was also canceled. And so, I think right now everyone is really going through something, and I think it's super important that we also take care of our own mental well-being. So my fiance decided let's get out of town for a day, celebrate the wedding in rural Mississippi. So we're driving up to a cabin in rural Mississippi just to get some time to really kind of decompress and connect with each other. So I'm in the car with my little dog. There's Vincent. He's a brand new puppy. So I didn't want to miss this event, because I never miss an event. And I just want to let y'all know that everyone is going through something in this situation. As someone that lives in New Orleans, I can tell you, the resiliency of humans is pretty incredible. We've been through a lot in this town, and I think we're stronger and smarter than we've ever been. So that's why I am where I am right now. And thank you guys for bearing with me. I figured it'd be less distracting to just have my picture, but I'll come back in a couple times and show my video as well.
That's great. Thanks, Jeff. And just so everyone knows, Jeff agreed to do this after he knew that the wedding was off for tomorrow. We had not asked him to do this on the night of his rehearsal dinner. So, and nor is he sitting on his spin bike and calling into this chat. So, so let's get to some of these questions.
I wish I was on my spin bike right now.
Let's get to some of these questions. I think a good one to start with is this idea of, is it all right? One of the questions is, can we reach out to admissions directors at our top schools personally through emails, just to ask them questions and introduce ourselves, or does that bother them? And I don't know, Peaches, do you want to start with this one? And if other people have things to say, they can, about reaching out to maybe not just admissions directors, but admissions.
Mm-hmm. Well, definitely. I mean, my email, my actual direct phone number are on our website at Hamilton. And again, I think, we might not have the volumes such as Oregon or Tulane, but definitely it's one of those things I would want to encourage students, especially if they're going to be asking us questions about determining fit. And I think especially in this particular time, when that physical aspect of in connecting with the school is not available, I think sending an email about how you're doing or what, any questions that you have is really helpful. And so I think whether that's your admissions officer assigned to your particular school or state, or if it's the dean or the director, absolutely, those messages are answered. And just so you know that these are people who are answering. It's not like an automated response that a student would get. So.
Great. Jim, any thoughts on kind of from a larger school?
All these chats keep popping up. I couldn't hit my unmute button, sorry. All these great questions flying in. No, just in general, Peaches is right. There is an issue of scale here, and I love being accessible, but when we get to a bigger and bigger applicant pool, it is pretty impractical. So please know that there's a difference between whether it's easy to connect with us versus we want to connect. We love to connect, or we wouldn't be in this kind of work, but we do have to get kind of practical sometimes. We generally point people towards whichever of my staff works with their part of the country or of the globe as a starting point, and then every now and then something makes it through to me and I get so excited. But my assistant would probably strangle me once I hang up on this webinar tonight if I gave out my personal contact information. But we do love what we get to do, and we love talking with you about it. Never doubt that.
So I shouldn't have just posted your cell number in the chat then, you're saying? Okay. Um, um, and I've heard from a lot of admission deans and regional reps and people who work with different areas recently that, especially given the current moment we're in and their inability to, come to certain areas for college fairs this spring and to do things like that, they have more time to be, at some schools, have more time to be connecting individually with students and with groups of students. And so it's definitely worth trying to reach out to admission offices and connect with folks. And maybe let's, there's been a couple questions about this, so, and it's kind of related, and maybe Jeff, you could talk a little bit about this, but this role of demonstrated interest and how that plays into the application process at some schools, and maybe you could, Jeff, if you could just say a piece or two about what demonstrated interest is and kind of what role it plays for some schools and how people should approach it.
Yeah, for sure. And if my audio breaks up a little bit, just let me know. So
Okay.
I think demonstrated interest is taking on an interesting, turn in the world of coronavirus, and in some regards because the playing field is leveled right now. Regardless of your background or where you come from or how much money is in your bank account, no one has the ability to visit anywhere right now. And so, interestingly, colleges are going to great lengths.
I think we're losing you, Jeff. You there? All right.
As much content.
Yeah. Peaches or Jim, do you want to weigh in on the demonstrated interest piece and maybe kind of, especially given the virtual world we're living in now, how that plays in? Jim?
Sure, I'll give that a go. I do want to say, though, I'm one of the many institutions who has not measured this before, and we do not plan to change that next year. So I'll keep it brief other than that, because I think our other two guests may have more things to say, but do keep in mind there's a lot of us that continue to not consider that factor. There's a lot of reasons for that, but I'll just leave it at that. We're an institution that does not plan to start looking at that over this.
Right, and that's a good point. Maybe Peaches, I don't know if you can talk a little bit about the role of demonstrated interest, but I'll just say I think it's a fair question to ask colleges like University of Oregon or like wherever, and just if that is part of their process, and expect transparency, like you're saying, Jim. It's not, and so I think it's fine for applicants to ask that. Peaches, do you have anything you want to say on the demonstrated interest piece?
I mean, I think we, at a school such as, at Hamilton, which we're a little bit smaller than the other schools here. I mean, we are not one that actually does a check kind of list. Like, I've done a visit, I've, done an interview. We're not that type of institution, but we do look at fit. And we see fit defined in so many other ways and through interest. So that could be visiting campus. It could be seeing us at a college fair, but we're not quantifying it in any way. We're not going to say, oh, well, they didn't do all these things, therefore they're not going to be a stronger applicant. I think for us, it's really like how, when we see a student apply to the college, if they, show any interest of writing an additional essay or supplemental essay or having a conversation with us, that stuff gets looked at, but it's not going to make or break a decision. I think it's a lot about accessibility. Not everyone can travel to Hamilton, even during a non-pandemic climate. And so we want to make sure that our information's out there. And if the student engages with us, sure, but we're not going to say you have to satisfy all these requirements in order to be a strong candidate at Hamilton.
That's great. Since you mentioned fit, I'll just stay with you for a second, Peaches. There was a question in here about how a student, how do you get a sense, how do you know if a school that you're looking at is a good fit for you? And I like to think, I'm kind of hesitant with the idea of fit, but how do you know if it's a good match for you, I guess? What are some of the ways that you tell students to help determine that?
Well, so I actually I have a nephew and a goddaughter right now who are juniors, and so they're going through this process right now. And it's one of the conversations that I'm having with them about fit. And to me, a lot of it's about, what do you, when I talk to them, I talk to them as I would to talk to a family, is just, what do you like about high school? Like, what is that experience? Do you like the smaller class sizes? Or do you like large class sizes? Do you want to be able, how do you want to engage with your faculty members? How do you want to engage in your community? And so let's start looking at from that lens. Like, what are those things that are going to help you be successful and thrive in a college setting? And so, okay, that's great. Let's step outside your comfort zone. Let's try something new. Have you thought of regionally something, a place that'd be different, but maybe has the qualities of the school that you would like? And so I kind of bring it from that lens of determining fit, about what do they really think that they'll would help them be successful in a college setting. Are there opportunities? We know we don't want college to be that 13th, 14th year of high school. So, how do you want to be challenged? What type of space would you feel comfortable being challenged in? So I start asking them these kind of questions. There definitely isn't a perfect school. Like, just as you were saying from your own experience, had my parents told me I'd end up at a women's college and love that experience and apply early decision and end up working there, I probably would have said, you all are crazy. Like, that's not going to happen. And it's, I see it as an opportunity to find fit is, do they have the resources and the opportunities for you to grow? At the same time, is that growth going to be challenge you in a way to grow in ways that you never thought you would?
Great.
I wanted to add one thing that kind of combines all of these questions together about finding fit, demonstrated interest, and emailing. The best resource you have right now as prospective students are our current students. All of our students are home right now, and they are dying to talk about their institutions because they miss these places. And so for us, one of the biggest keys to demonstrating your interest is writing a really great why Tulane statement. And one way you get some good content is to reach out to our ambassadors, reach out to the tour guides at Tulane or University of Oregon and see what they've got to say. So yes, it's okay to email us, but really right at this point in the process, reach out to our students because they are dying to talk about the schools that they miss so much.
That's a great point. And since you said this issue of missing school so much, I think that's a great way to look at match too. And I was on a call, a webinar with Rick Clark down at Georgia Tech just earlier this week. And one of the things he really was highlighting for students is, for high school students to think about, what do you miss most about your school right now, right? Like, what are you missing right now about the people you were with, the type of learning you were doing, the community you were in? What are you missing most about that? And then use that to kind of think about what you're looking for in a college and how those things might mesh with you in a school you're looking at. I want to get to some of these other questions here in the chat. Kind of a reoccurring question is, as you're probably not surprised, is this issue of deferring. And what you all are anticipating at your schools. Are you seeing already kind of more requests for deferrals? Maybe you could talk a little bit about some of where your schools are with planning for the fall and what you anticipate and I'm throwing this all together, but how that might impact juniors applying next year if there are more seniors deferring this year. Is that going to make it harder for them to get in next year? Jim, do you have any thoughts on this, the whole issue?
About gapping and waiting and all that kind of stuff and its impact on next year.
Yeah.
It's funny. We're hearing a lot of buzz around the topic, but for all the people asking us about deferring so far, we haven't had many people go through our process yet, and that doesn't mean they won't. But we have a lot of people thinking about it, many of whom, at least those asking us, they're asking this question of deferral, which we think of like gap years and other things, waiting to start college, only to find out a couple of questions in that they actually mean, I'm going to stay home and start college somewhere else and then come to you. And so if nothing else, I think it's important that we remind everybody that's not what most of us think of as a deferral. And so on a very practical note, if anybody that thinks of themselves as waiting to come to us for a year starts somewhere else, we're going to call them a transfer student at that point. We're going to look at how they did at that other college. Certain scholarships won't be available anymore. It's a very different thing. So first of all, just in a watch your terminology sense, I wanted to bring that up. But also, we can't imagine a scenario where we do so much with however many of those students there end up being this year that it makes life harder for next year's seniors. And in fact, the more I hear that question, the more I'm just deciding, I don't know what we mean by this yet, but we're going to commit to making sure it doesn't become a problem. And the rest of it, we're just going to have to see how it plays out.
That's great. Thanks. Jeff, any thoughts?
You know, I think we're carefully evaluating it, and I think Jim's points are all really accurate. What we're basically trying to do is encourage students to really let us know sooner rather than later about these gap years, because we want to be able to, if needed, you know, backfill that from students from our wait list. So it's a, you know, a constant game of tug and pull with enrollment management. And you also, as a lot of juniors are concerned, they are concerned that will it be harder to get in next year because we have all these students returning from the gap year. So, you know, the world of enrollment management has a lot of complexities to us, and we're monitoring this. But as Jim mentioned, we're seeing pretty consistent numbers from this point last year, so no major uptick quite yet. I'm at a rest stop, by the way.
Looks
nice. Yeah,
I do want to add one more thought about this right now, if I can, just really quick, is that any of the seniors who are thinking about this right now, watch how your gap year decision process interacts with whatever we're doing to extend or not extend our May 1 deadlines. There's a good few schools that have extended to June 1st, specifically because of this thought process. If you haven't heard, University of Oregon took the ultimate leap of insanity. We'd like to think of student-centeredness, but it's probably insanity. We're actually extending our date to September 1st now. And over that time, we especially think some decisions about gap or not gap. We're going to have students come, go all summer long. And so just when a school gives you more time, take it. If we're able to offer it, it's because we want you to feel like you can work through that process, talk with us as much as you want, and then reach a decision at whatever time we tell you you can.
Yeah, and I would just echo, I mean, that's my conversations. I just wrote a piece at the end of last week for Forbes about deferrals. And how students should approach that. And I talked to a lot of college admission deans and a lot of looked at a lot of the surveys out there, and I think I would just caution people to be wary of kind of the headlines around deferrals, and I think that actually causes people to get, all of a sudden people think everybody else is going to defer, and so, you know, maybe I should be doing it. But some of the surveys that were done around people's plans on deferrals were pretty limited sample sizes and were pretty limited demographics that they were sampling. And so, and was earlier on, and a lot has changed and continues to change. So I would just, again, look for the truth. Look for the truth in the numbers and as you approach things. Can we talk a little bit about standardized testing? I know all of your schools have gone test optional. Is that right? No. Yes. Yeah. Just kind of, so there's a question about, from Roberto, our daughter's current junior, and she has a 3.6 GPA. She was working hard this semester to bring her GPA up to be more competitive. However, now her school has gone past fail. She's devastated that she can't do anything about her GPA, and she hasn't taken the SAT. Even for your schools that are test optional now, at least for this year, and some permanently, do you recommend students try to take the SAT? Especially if they're going to be, should they try to get it in, or the ACT, and should they try to get in before maybe early applications are due? Any thoughts on that?
You know, I had this exact conversation with a mom the other day, and she shared the exact concerns. And I essentially told her there's three options here. One, the first option is that, your daughter or son can buckle down, focus on studying for the SAT, try to get into some of these test dates as they become available, and really kind of proceed as if they really want to make the SAT a big part of their application process. And then when they get their scores, they'll submit them. Plan B is to do that same thing, wait to see what the scores are, and then kind of say, all right, these scores aren't really reflective. I've been too stressed. I only got to take them I'm only got to take them once, so I'm just not going to submit them. And then the third idea is just say, you know what, I'm not doing the SATs at all. I'd rather just have this piece of anxiety pie removed from my plate, and I will apply to schools that are test optional for this term. And those are, a decision that families can make together, but the students really should have a long thought process. If you want to just get this off of your plate, then there's a lot of great schools out there that are test optional right now. If it's still a part that you think will be reflective of your ability as a student, then you can go ahead and take it. But I think those are 3 avenues you can take. And, we can't specifically tell you which one to pick, but at least you got options right now.
And so for the student who does choose that, and potentially their school is pass-fail this spring, what are you as admissions officers? I don't know, Peaches, maybe you could take this one. How are you making decisions next year, and what are you going to be focusing on? I mean, that's been a constant question we've been asked.
No, that's a great question. And I think a lot of us are all still kind of figuring out what we're going to be doing in some ways. However, again, we have 1 semester of no grades, but we have 2.5 to 3 other years of grades worth of grades. So the thing is, context is going to matter. We know that we're all going to be in this place where this particular semester, the spring semester, is going to be most likely pass-fail, no credit for a lot of our students. And so we still will see their 9th up until first semester of 11th grade. And then we may see information as a 12th grader as well. So I think, again, it's 1 semester where we know that they've had to adjust. And I think all of us are being really sensitive. This is not just one institution that's been impacted. It's the whole world that's been impacted by this. So I think we're going to be approaching it with a lot of empathy and sympathy and being just very sensitive in general. And again, I think that there's some worries about we will be using the same type of, we're going to be assessing in the same ways that we've assessed before. And I think we're going to be using the information given to us by the schools. So the schools will help us and guide us in regards to how their students are being evaluated, and we'll be reviewing it based on that. So, so I think the high school profile will probably look a little different. It will, we'll have letters from counselors explaining how students were assessed, and we're going to take all that into consideration in the process.
And is there any talk? And Jim, I don't know, maybe you could address some of this. Is there any talk about pushing back early action or early decision deadlines? I mean, given that folks might be wanting to wait for first quarter or first trimester grades, is there any talk about kind of pushing the calendar back at your schools? Jim?
At Oregon, we have not talked about pushing back any of our deadlines yet. We do have an early action program. And even within that, I should emphasize, Oregon's made the very conscious long-term choice that we've never let EA applicants have a different chance of admission than regular applicants. It's just a timing thing. So again, even when you use these terms at our schools, you're going to see different operationalizations of what we do with that term. But to any extent that we might ever consider this next year because of tests not being available for a while, there's no way on earth we make students wait around for that. And going back to Roberto's question, I think all of us would consider it a win for Roberto's daughter, not dare letting fear of taking that test have her do a gap year. If things are complicated enough that she can't take that test for a while, and there's a college out there that has her already wanting to meet Roberto's daughter, she's full IB and I'm in love already.
I would just add to that I think we'll probably stick with our deadlines only because I think we need some sense of normalcy in this process. And I hate to say it, but in order to really get going with things again, we have to, in some regards, keep some of the similarities of the past, or it will just feel too out of whack, as Peaches mentioned. So I think sticking with our deadlines, being compassionate, being understanding, assuming grade trends that started in sophomore year will continue through senior year, giving every single student the benefit of the doubt, knowing that everyone is going through something right now, and trying to find some normalcy as it pertains to deadlines. But I can't echo my colleagues enough. We're going to give every student the benefit of the doubt. I mean, as we can all tell, we're all going through something, and we get it. You know, this is a rough time. No college is going to penalize you in any way, shape, or form for anything you've had to experience the last 6 weeks, 8 weeks, however long it's been.
Like learning at a rest stop or something like that.
It's a beautiful rest stop. So,
so can we dig into this issue of testing just a little more, because I think there's some more questions, and then we'll move on. So there's one question about kind of test optional. Does it mean test blind? And really, at your schools, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that it's not test blind, because if a student submits testing, you're going to look at it, but it's they have the option to do that, and they will not be disadvantaged if they don't submit testing. The one question that is there is about merit scholarships. How are tests required for merit scholarships, and should students submit tests if they have strong testing? Is that going to help them? Does anybody want to touch on that?
You know, I'll say, as a school that does offer some pretty substantial merit scholarships, including a number of full tuition awards, this is a really good question that we're looking into. You know, what we want to do is be equitable to everyone, regardless of if they submit their scores or not. The reality is we're going to have, you know, we have a number of full tuition scholarships, and we're going to have 3,000 students with a 4.0 GPA with glowing letters of recommendation. And some are going to submit scores and some are not. And I would be lying if I said that the ones who are submitting super strong test scores, I mean, yeah, for those full tuition scholarships, at some point, I think we're going to have to look at those scores. Yes, students who don't submit scores will absolutely be considered for these big awards, and some of them might get it. But I will say at that point, it is really tough to suss out. You know, you're comparing these incredible applicants to each other, so I would be lying if I didn't tell you a really strong score there. That probably will help you with some of our merit scholarships, just in full candidacy.
Jim, any thoughts?
Mainly, I'd say what Jeff said, but if I could add anything, I might just point out that, again, we can't speak for all those possibilities next year. And certainly there are going to be some institutions out there who make for a more predictable road if there's a test score to go along with the rest of that record. And again, I think all of us are ready to put a whole lot of grains of salt on those test scores when we get them, if they aren't where they want to be. But on the other hand, if it's out of them, especially, get them, it might make some things go more smoothly.
Yeah, and I mean, it's like anything with college admission. Is the answer is it depends, right? It depends on the school and depends on the other parts of the application.
I did want to add one thing that I don't know if a lot of folks are aware of, but there is, I mean, so with the world of U.S. News and World Report that unfortunately many folks do live in, you know, there is a penalty. Schools are penalized if a large portion of their pool of students comes in without testing, and that's a challenge for a lot of, you know, presidents and boards of directors, because if for better or for worse, no one wants to be dinged for doing something that they believe is the right thing to do right now. So again, I go to the idea of this, you know, tug of war in the world of enrollment management, but I do want to make sure folks are aware that that is a part of U.S. News and World Report. So,
well, and maybe if there's a silver lining to this whole situation we're in, maybe it's the downfall of the U.S. News and World Report rankings. You know, there's a lot of pieces that are going to disappear from the calculus around those ratings.
Don't you dare get my hopes up.
I know. Well, you heard it here first. So another question that folks really want to talk about is, and I haven't really been going to it here in the chat because I think I know the answer, but this question of will your campuses be opening up again in the fall? And I imagine the answer is we don't know, but any thoughts on kind of where the plans are now on your various campuses and what you're hearing from colleagues and other schools? Peaches, where are you with all that?
Definitely, I think our goal, like all of our institutions, is that we want to be open for the fall. And honestly, it will really, we're trying to balance all the needs out, whether we can get all of our students onto campus. For example, our international student populations, will they be able to return to campus based on their visas? Are we going to have students who are going abroad? What does our governor say? So what is state regulations? What's the Department of Health? And so I think the thing is, this has been a discussion that happens every day. What I will say that what I've appreciated about our community is that, and I'm certain it's happening at all of our schools, is that the students are always the center of the decision. That is the focus, about making sure that we can provide them the education that they have committed themselves to. So I'm crossing my fingers that we're going to be open in the fall, and I'm certain that we're going to probably have to make some adjustments. But I'm crossing my fingers because I think all of us just really want to be back on campus. So.
Jeff, did you want to add anything to that?
So I'm on the calendar committee at Tulane right now. Well, let me tell you, that is a wild committee to be on. It's everyone from public health experts to the various deans of the schools to deans of students, and it is, I mean, everyone's got their opinion. But we're making progress, and I think the biggest goal that we're looking towards, and Peaches mentioned international students, and there's all these levers you got to pull. We've got an additional one here in New Orleans about hurricane season, and figuring out what happens if we have to evacuate. But what we are really focusing on is trying to create a semester that is one semester. And then what I mean by that is not going back and forth for fall break, not going home for Thanksgiving break. So we don't know what we're doing yet at Tulane, but I think trying, as Peaches mentioned, with students in mind, lessening the impact of our students and they're interfacing with other people. So can we get our students to campus maybe even early and then run straight through all the way to a certain date, and then they go home for winter break rather than going home for fall break, Thanksgiving. So there are a lot of people working very hard at every university in America to get back on campus in some regard, whether it's a hybrid model, whether it's an abbreviated or truncated semester. So no matter where you are, no matter where you're going to school, rest assured that we are working our butts off to make you safe and to create an experience on campus. And none of us have a crystal ball, but we're doing the absolute best we can and getting as creative as we possibly can with this. So stay tuned.
And since you mentioned international students, both, and Jim, I don't know if you want to touch on this one, this question about whether or not international students who are at American schools, high schools in the US right now should stay for the summer so they know they can be in this country. The advice I've heard is that because of the uncertainty around visa issues, that students should plan on, if they have the means to stay in the country, they should stay in the country so that they can be on campus next fall. Jim, any thoughts on that? He's frozen.
I'm surprised I haven't heard anybody ask that before. So I'm kind of responding to this, but it makes a lot of sense to me. I think with all of us, international students are going to be a group that we have some very specific communications with about this, but one way or another, I know what I'm going to be emailing somebody about tonight now. Question.
Yeah. So another question that's come up a couple times is this kind of idea of what, what stands out in terms of extracurricular activities, in terms of involvement, in terms of summer opportunities. What would you advise students, I guess generally, but also in our current situation? Jeff?
Okay, so here's what I want. When this is all over and you can leave your home again and you can, hug your friends again. What I want all the students out there watching to do is go live your life. I want you to go do the things that you enjoy. I want you to re-engage with the community in the way that you want to. What none of us want you to do is go out there and feel like you have to make up for lost time with colleges, or figure out things that you can quickly do because you couldn't do things for the time we were in quarantine. We want you to go live your life. And Brennan mentioned our colleague Rick from Georgia Tech. He had a brilliant piece of advice that I heard. And he said, you know, if there was something that you missed deeply while you were in isolation, while you were in quarantine, go out and go do that thing again. If there was something that you were kind of like, man, I don't miss that thing, or I'm kind of dreading going back to it, don't do it again. What we want you to do when this is over is to live your life and be the best version of yourself, and not worry about what you think colleges want to see. You know, we've been through a lot. And so when this is all over, go re-engage with the things you truly love, and then don't worry as much about colleges right now, because we have zero expectations for you. I mean, we want you to do something, but don't worry about us. Worry about yourself.
Peaches or Jim, any thoughts on that? On summer, or on ways students can be engaged? Jim?
Sure, I'll just throw out that on top of what Jeff's talking about in light of the pandemic, I think it was true before too, that activities and extracurriculars should have never been about doing more. It should be about doing A, the things you love, and B, therefore doing enough of them that you make an impact by being there. And I've always thought it'd be great to see applicants take well, I don't think of it as a risk, but maybe they'd see it as a risk. Tell us about something you did for a while and then realized you really shouldn't keep doing, because I think we can learn some really neat things about you from that. And so maybe a variation on that old advice I've always given is kind of like Jeff, and he's mentioning Rick, would say, if there's something you realize, oh my gosh, I don't miss that at all, that is gold. And we would love to hear you even talk more about it. And then again, feel fine just doing what you really want to be doing and helping us see how that helps us know who you are.
Sounds like a great essay question. Peaches, any thoughts on that?
I don't think I don't think I have really much to add. I think Jim and Jeff really covered it. I usually, even pre-pandemic, I was still saying to students, do what you love. Like, don't worry about what you think we want to hear or read. If you want to blow glass for the summer because that's what you love, then blow glass. Like, you don't take a class because you feel like it's something we need to see. We want authenticity. I think that's the truest sense of this process, is that we want true self, we want sincerity, we want people to be authentic. And that was true regardless of what's going on right now. So if anything, I agree with Jim and Jeff, just jump into that and just simply do you during, you know, once everything lifts.
It's a great point. And this will maybe be our final question, and then we'll do a kind of a wrap up, rapid fire question. But there's this question about how students can make the most of the virtual experiences. You know, schools are rolling out these really robust virtual visit experiences and other programming online. And what would be your recommendation for students and parents as they kind of engage with these virtual opportunities? Jim?
I can start. They aren't the same, are they? But they are really neat potentially. And please know, any of you that try what we're doing, and we have sound issues, I hope you'll grade us on a very gentle curve there. Some of us are at campuses, and I think it's a testament to how much we value the in-person environment. A lot of us are really still getting our feet under us about trying to be present online. But with these virtual visits and other opportunities, a lot of us are going to try to get you to come to things live, mainly because we want you to do, well, just like you're doing right now, you're asking us questions, and that can be a nice sidebar. But don't ever think that, oh, if I couldn't make that event, it's probably not worth it. I promise you're going to still learn from a well-run one of these programs. You're going to learn a lot just by logging in and viewing it later, or at least that's part of our job. And so don't think you have to come when they happen. You're going to still get plenty out of them when they happen at other times. The other thing I'd just throw on top of this is, in addition to these group events, almost every college admissions office is ramping up our ability to do Zoom and other kind of online one-on-one appointments, since we can't come see you or you see us. Use that, and don't be too self-conscious about it. Just let us talk with you. And again, we're hiding dirty coffee mugs in the background too. So it's just a chance to talk, and we love having an alternative way to do it.
Thanks.
You know, I think right now, I was mentioning this earlier, but I got cut out by the bad service. You know, the playing field is leveled, you know, regardless of who you are or where you come from. You know, no one can visit right now. So in some regards, it's an interesting opportunity for everyone to kind of engage. And one suggestion I've been giving is, maybe as a high school junior, you know, for the next couple of weeks, just pick one school a week. And maybe for the next couple of weeks, you just kind of delve into that one school. So you do 2 of their events. You do a virtual campus tour, or maybe a Q&A, and then take some notes. And then the next week you pick another school. You know, it's tough. There's no real playbook to how to do things right now. But I would say, you know, maybe one school a week to really to really focus on, and take some notes and then go from there. Do the best you can. Honestly, everyone, as Jim said, is just doing the best they can.
It's a great point. Great, thanks. Okay, so wrap up question as we're getting close to the witching hour here. What would you, maybe we'll start with Peaches and then go Jim and Jeff. What would you do, knowing what you know now, not necessarily with the virus and everything that's going on in this moment, but knowing what you know now, what would you have done differently about your college search, or what would you tell students to do differently about their college search?
What would I tell if I was in basically in their shoes?
Yeah.
I think probably, and I hate to say this, I probably would have stepped back and took a deep breath and realized everything's going to be fine. I think even though I found a school that I applied to early decision and that I absolutely loved, I think I added a lot of pressure on myself because I felt like I had to be perfect. I felt I had to be this package. And what I realized is that I think now, and when I talk to students, is like, we love all of that. We love your little idiosyncrasies and your quirks, and we love what you're passionate about and your nerdiness. And I think that's, I felt like, now that I've been in this profession for so long, I realize we're not looking for perfection, and we're not expecting perfection after 4 years either in college. Like that's what I love about it now. I love the diversity of everything of students, and I think it adds to a community and adds flavor. And so I think I probably would have stepped back and advised myself to take a breath and realize that in the end, you're going to find an awesome place. It's going to be a place where you're going to thrive, and it's going to be transformative. And it may not be the most popular bumper sticker or sweatshirt purchased, but it's going to be a place where you're going to be happy. And I think that's where I probably would have, I was lucky. I think I was lucky to find a place I was going to be happy in, but I think I would have probably entered college a little less stressed. So.
Great point. Jim?
I'd say, looking back, one of the main things I find myself thinking about a lot, and I keep seeing it play out over and over again with our applicants each year, is that we often think of where we're going to go to college as the place that matches who we are. And yet we talk so much about who we want to become. And I wish I could go back and tell 11th grade, 12th grade me to think about where I wanted to get. I can't compete with a dog. I'm just going to stop for a second. But no, in all seriousness, I think if we aim for a college that feels right to us based on who we are, but we want to keep growing, we're missing a chance. And so I'd love to go back and tell me that really and part of this is just back to that earlier advice I think you gave, Brennan, of embracing the possibilities, is that it's exactly about that, is that if we want to keep growing, don't go to a place that's a perfect fit now. Go to a place that's going to become the best fit it can be. And remember that that's an active process all along.
It's a great point. Thanks. All right, Jeff, you're closing us out here.
Okay, so I mentioned earlier at the beginning of this presentation that things have a way of working themselves out, and I mentioned that I was supposed to get married this weekend, and instead of getting married, we got a puppy, and this is Vincent. And Drew and I, my fiance, look at each other sometimes, and we're like, kind of worth it. We had to cancel our wedding because this little angel is like, I mean, he's been life-changing for us. So everything's going to have its ups and downs. And I went back to that beginning piece of advice, everything, everything will be all right in the end. If it's not all right, it's not the end. And I use that as an analogy for the college search process and through everything we're going through as a world right now. Things are crazy right now, but sometimes you get these little angels of dogs that come into your life, and sometimes you end up at a school that's a great fit, and sometimes you don't. Sometimes you transfer, but eventually things work themselves out, whether you realize it right now or not. So Vincent says, hello, everyone. It'll be okay. Love you too. Sorry.
On that note of things not being an end, I will say that this webinar series is not ending, and we still have weeks to go. Next week with us at 7 o'clock on next Thursday night will be Gary Clark from UCLA, and Chris Gruber from Davidson College, and Beth Weiser from The Ohio State University. So join us next week, and thank you all so much. I know these are challenging times, and really appreciate your wisdom and sharing some time with us. And thank you all for joining us. Have a great night.